The second Madison walked through the front door, I felt it, that strange, almost imperceptible shift in the air. She had been gone for 3 days, and I should have felt relief at having her back. But instead, something about her presence felt off. It wasn't just the way she smiled, too wide, too bright. It was her entire aura. She strolled inside with an ease that didn't match someone returning from a grueling work trip. No, she carried herself like someone who had just returned from an exhilarating escape, like she had been on an adventure rather than in Denver for business. Her suitcase trailed behind her, and with an exaggerated sigh, she let her purse drop onto the hallway table. Then, stretching her arms above her head, she let out a deep breath, like she had just stepped off a sun-drenched beach instead of a crowded airplane. I stood leaning against the kitchen counter, quietly observing her, taking in every little detail. "Home sweet home," she finally said, flashing that same overly practiced grin. "Yeah," I responded slowly. "Welcome back." I should have walked up to her, pulled her into a hug, maybe kissed her like I always did after time apart. But something inside me held me back, an instinct I couldn't quite name yet. Instead, I stayed put, watching as she shrugged off her coat and collapsed onto the couch, kicking off her shoes with a dramatic sigh. "I swear, that trip drained the life out of me," she groaned, rubbing her face. "Meetings all day, networking dinners all night. God, I am so over these work trips." I nodded, but I barely processed her words. My mind was elsewhere, running through a list of inconsistencies that didn't sit right. First, there was her hair. When she left, her dark strands had been neatly pulled into a tight bun, her usual professional style. But now, loose waves framed her face like she had taken time to style them just right before landing. Like she wanted to look good for someone. Then there was her scent. She always wore the same floral perfume to business events, the one I had gotten her for her birthday. But this was different. It was heavier, muskier, a fragrance I didn't recognize. The kind that lingers after being close to someone for too long. I forced a smile. "How was your flight?" She waved a hand dismissively. "Uneventful. I passed out the whole way." That was a lie. Madison never slept on flights. She always said turbulence made her too anxious to relax. I clenched my jaw, inhaling through my nose, trying to steady myself. Maybe I was just overthinking. Maybe I was exhausted from being alone the past few days. But then my eyes landed on her suitcase. It was sitting by the door, slightly unzipped, just enough for me to catch a glimpse of what was inside. A sliver of red fabric peeked out between her folded clothes. I frowned. That wasn't hers. I knew her wardrobe better than anyone. And Madison never wore red lingerie. She always said it was too bold, too flashy. A tight knot formed in my stomach. I glanced back at her, still lounging on the couch, still stretching like someone who had just had the time of their life. "Did you bring back any souvenirs?" I asked, keeping my voice even. She lifted her head slightly, her brows pulling together in brief confusion. "Huh. You know," I shrugged. "A little something for me?" For the briefest second, I saw it, the flicker of panic in her expression before she quickly masked it with another breezy smile. "Oh, she let out a light laugh, running a hand through her hair. "I totally forgot. I was just so busy the whole time, I didn't even get a chance to do any shopping." Liar. My heart pounded as I walked toward her suitcase. I could feel her watching me now, her body shifting slightly, sitting up straighter. "What are you doing?" she asked, and there it was, something new in her voice. Nervousness. I crouched beside the suitcase and reached for the zipper. "Just wanted to help you unpack." Before I could fully unzip it, she was off the couch in an instant. "I can do it later," she said quickly, reaching for the handle. But it was too late. The zipper slid the rest of the way down, and that's when I saw it. Not just the red lace bra. A crumpled men's shirt. A boarding pass, one with a different return date than the one she had told me. And a small bottle of cologne. Not mine. The blood drained from my face. Slowly, I lifted my gaze to her, and for the first time since she walked through that door, her carefully crafted smile was gone. Madison swallowed hard, her hands twitching at her sides. I exhaled, my voice eerily calm. "Go on," I said. "Tell me the truth." The excitement, The joy that had lit up Madison's face when she first walked through the door, it was gone. In an instant, it had evaporated, replaced by a stiffness in her posture, a tension in her eyes. Her mouth opened, but no words came out. She flicked her gaze between the suitcase and me, like she was scrambling for an escape route. I stayed crouched beside the suitcase, my fingers gripping the zipper, my heartbeat hammering against my ribs. The evidence was sitting right there, woven between neatly folded clothes. The red lace bra that didn't belong to her. The men's shirt that smelled like someone else. The boarding pass with a different date than what she had told me. And that damn bottle of cologne. She cleared her throat, her voice suddenly higher-pitched than normal. Look, I can explain. I stood up slowly, inhaling through my nose, forcing myself to keep my expression neutral. I wasn't going to lose control. Not yet. Explain what, exactly? My voice came out too calm, too measured. She took a step back. It's not what it looks like. I let out a quiet chuckle, shaking my head. Classic. The oldest excuse in the book. The same line cheaters had been using since the beginning of time. I picked up the boarding pass, turning it over in my fingers. You told me you were supposed to come home today, I said, holding it up. This says you were booked for a flight yesterday. I lifted an eyebrow. Why the extra night, Madison? She licked her lips, blinking rapidly. There was a delay, so I had to rebook. Work covered it. Really? I nodded slowly, pretending to consider her words. Because I checked your flight status last night. It landed on time. Her face paled. I could see her brain scrambling, searching for another lie, another quick escape. I reached into the suitcase and pulled out the men's shirt. It was wrinkled, shoved between her things like an afterthought. The scent of cologne was strong, too strong. I didn't recognize the brand, but I recognized what it meant. I held it up. Whose is this? She hesitated. Just a second too long. It's a co-worker's, she said finally, her voice uneven. I spilled coffee on myself. He let me borrow it. I forgot to give it back. A dry laugh escaped me. Right, I said, shaking my head. And I'm supposed to believe that? She squared her shoulders, suddenly shifting from nervous to defensive. Why are you interrogating me like this? She snapped. You're acting crazy. There it was. The deflection. She was trying to turn this around, trying to make me feel like I was the one being unreasonable. Hoping I would back off. Hoping I would drop it. But I wasn't letting this go. I took a slow step forward, lowering my voice. You know what the worst part of this is, Madison? She swallowed, her throat bobbing. I shook my head. It's not that you're lying to me right now. It's not even that you think I'm dumb enough to believe these garbage excuses. My fingers tightened around the fabric of the men's shirt. It's that you came home smiling. Like everything was fine. Like you didn't just. My voice caught in my throat. She was silent now, staring at me, her lips pressed together. And then, as the room settled into an unbearable stillness, something occurred to me. I dropped the shirt back into the suitcase and took another step toward her, watching her closely. You weren't planning on coming back, were you? The color drained from her face so fast I almost felt sorry for her. Almost. I tilted my head. That's why you look surprised to be standing here. That's why you're acting so thrown off that I'm asking questions. My voice dropped even lower. Something happened, didn't it? Something changed your plan. Her lips parted, but nothing came out. I let the silence stretch between us, watching her fight an internal war with herself. I could see the truth clawing at the edges of her expression, but she was still desperately trying to suppress it. I took a deep breath. Tell me the truth, Madison. Her chest rose and fell quickly. Her hands trembled at her sides. And then, in the softest voice, almost a whisper, she said, I made a mistake. I stared at her, my entire body cold. I should have felt anger. I should have exploded. But I didn't. Because in that moment, as she stood there, finally cracking, finally breaking down, I realized something. I didn't know this woman anymore. The Madison I had loved, the woman I had built a life with. She was a stranger now. Silence settled between us, thick and suffocating. Madison had just said 4 words that changed everything. I made a mistake. I should have felt relief that she was finally admitting to something, but I didn't. Because a mistake is what you call it when you forget to pay a bill on time. It's what you say when you accidentally put salt in your coffee instead of sugar. This wasn't a mistake. This was a choice. I took a slow, steady breath, my hands tightening at my sides. A mistake, I repeated, my voice eerily calm. You're going to have to be a little more specific than that, Madison. She hesitated, shifting her weight from one foot to the other. Her eyes flickered toward the suitcase, like she was hoping it would somehow swallow up the evidence sitting inside. Like if she ignored it long enough, the truth would just disappear. I watched as she struggled, her lips parting, then closing again. She was calculating, trying to figure out just how much she could say without losing everything. I exhaled sharply. Madison, stop. She flinched. I ran a hand through my hair, my pulse hammering. I already know, I continued, my voice dropping lower. I know you weren't on a work trip. I know you weren't just sitting through meetings and networking events. I gestured toward the suitcase. I mean, come on. How stupid do you think I am? She swallowed hard, her hands twisting together. I didn't, she stuttered, then stopped herself. Didn't what? I cut her off. Didn't mean for me to find out. Didn't mean to get caught. Her face crumpled. Didn't mean for this to happen. I let out a humorless laugh. Because you meant for everything else, didn't you? My voice sharpened. You meant to book that extra night. You meant to pack that lingerie. You meant to spend your time with whoever he is. Her eyes flashed, and for a split second, I saw something new. Anger. Like I was the one in the wrong. Like I was the one causing a problem by putting the pieces together. And that was the moment I really saw her. Not the woman I thought I married. Not the woman I had built a life with. Someone else entirely. Someone who had been living a second life right under my nose. Someone who had looked me in the eye and lied so smoothly, so effortlessly, that I never saw it coming. I took a step back, shaking my head. How long, Madison? Her breath hitched. What? How long have you been cheating on me? She opened her mouth, but no sound came out. I could see the war happening in her mind. Tell the truth. Lie. Deflect. I let out a slow breath. You might as well be honest now, I said. Because I swear, if you keep lying, whatever tiny shred of respect I have left for you will be gone. She blinked rapidly, her throat bobbing as she swallowed. Then, barely above a whisper, she said, "This was the first time." I tilted my head, studying her. You expect me to believe that? Her jaw tightened. Because it's true, she insisted. I laughed, but it wasn't real laughter. It was sharp, bitter, something that scraped its way up from deep inside my chest. All right, I said. So you just happened to book an extra night at a hotel. You just happened to pack brand new lingerie. You just happened to, what? Fall into some guy's lap by accident. Her face turned red. It wasn't like that. Then what was it like, Madison? I pressed. She bit her lip, her fingers tightening into fists at her sides. And then, she made her biggest mistake yet. Her eyes flicked away. Just for a second. But it was enough. She wasn't looking away because she was ashamed. She was looking away because she was thinking about him. My stomach dropped. I took another step back, like putting distance between us would somehow make this whole thing less real. Who is he? She froze. What? You heard me, I said evenly. Who is he, Madison? She hesitated. And that hesitation, that was all the answer I needed. I nodded slowly, my jaw clenching. So it's someone I know. Her face twisted, and for the briefest second, I saw real panic. I let out a breath. Wow. The realization hit me like a punch to the gut. This wasn't some random guy she met at a hotel bar. This was someone close. Someone who had been around us. Someone who had probably smiled in my face while sleeping with my wife behind my back. And Madison knew I had figured it out. She took a shaky breath. Save it, I cut her off. I stared at her, really looking at her. And for the first time in my life, I didn't recognize the woman standing in front of me. She wasn't my wife. She wasn't the person I had loved. She was a stranger. And suddenly, everything made sense. I stood there gripping the edge of the table, my fingers pressing into the wood so hard my knuckles turned white. Madison hadn't answered me, but she didn't need to. Her silence was its own kind of confession. I had given her the opportunity to deny it, to fight back, to come up with some ridiculous story I could rip apart. Instead, she just stood there, caught in the headlights of her own lies, too paralyzed to figure out her next move. And that's when it hit me. This wasn't the first time she had lied to me. The memories came rushing in like an avalanche. All the little moments I had ignored. All the times I had brushed away that nagging feeling in my gut, convincing myself I was just being paranoid. Like when she started coming home later than usual. Always with a perfectly rehearsed excuse. The project deadline got pushed up. We had to stay late. Or when she started dressing differently. Not just nicer, but sexier. Wearing heels on days she never used to. Putting on perfume even when she was just heading to the office. Or those times I caught her on her phone, quickly swiping away the screen the second I walked into the room. "Ugh, just an annoying work email," she'd say, forcing a laugh. They never let me rest. I had believed her. Because I wanted to. Because the alternative meant admitting that my wife, the woman I had built a life with, the woman I had trusted, was lying to my face. And yet, here we were. I looked at her now. Really looked at her. And I saw it all so clearly. The panic in her eyes. The way she was holding herself stiff, bracing for impact. I wondered if she was about to break down, beg for forgiveness, tell me how much she regretted it. But she didn't. Instead, she did something else. She exhaled sharply, squared her shoulders, and rolled her eyes. "God, you're being so dramatic," she muttered, shaking her head. I blinked. I actually had to take a second to process that. "Dramatic," I repeated, my voice dangerously even. She crossed her arms over her chest, irritation flashing across her face. "I told you it was a mistake," she huffed. "It didn't mean anything. But you're standing here acting like the world is ending, like I murdered someone or something." My mouth fell open slightly. Was this really happening? I had caught her. I had literally found another man's shirt in her suitcase. And this was her response? No remorse. No apology. Just irritation that I wasn't letting it slide. I let out a dry laugh, shaking my head. She scoffed. "What? You really don't feel bad, do you?" I asked, my voice quieter now. She frowned, shifting on her feet like she hadn't expected me to say that. "Of course I feel bad," she said. "But it was weak. Forced. I mean, I didn't want this to happen. I never planned for it. It just happened." I took a slow, deep breath, forcing myself to stay calm. "No, Madison," I said evenly. "It didn't just happen." She looked away. "You made a choice." I took a step closer. "You chose to lie to me." Another step. "You chose to sleep with someone else." She swallowed hard, but I kept going. "You chose to come home and act like nothing happened." Her lips pressed into a thin line. "And worst of all," I continued, my voice dropping lower, "you chose to look me in the eyes and treat me like an idiot." She shook her head, frustration flashing in her eyes. "Why are you doing this?" she snapped. "Why are you making this harder than it needs to be?" I stared at her, my stomach twisting. "I'm making it hard." She let out a breath, rubbing her temples. "I mean, come on. We've been together for so long. We've had a good run. But people change. Feelings change. And maybe, just maybe, we need to rethink things." There it was. The final crack that shattered everything. I swallowed hard, something inside me going ice cold. "Rethink things," I echoed. She hesitated, biting her lip. I don't know if we're working anymore." And that was the final knife. I nodded slowly, stepping back, suddenly feeling exhausted. "Wow, I muttered under my breath. So this wasn't even a mistake to her. She had already considered it. She had already thought about leaving. She had been weighing her options, trying to figure out the best way to land on her feet. And I was just the fallback. The past decade of my life, had any of it even been real? Had I just been some comfortable backup plan for her? Someone she kept around until she found something better? A heavy silence settled between us, thick with everything neither of us was saying. And then, finally, I exhaled. I had my answer. I knew exactly who she was now. I turned away from her, not because I was done, but because I needed space. My hands were shaking. My jaw was so tight I could hear my own teeth grinding together. I didn't trust myself to stand there, face to face with Madison, and not explode. The kitchen felt like a safer place, though nothing about this house felt safe anymore. Everything that was once warm and familiar now felt staged. Artificial. Like a set built to keep me believing in a lie. The wedding photos on the wall. The little souvenirs we had collected from vacations. The magnets on the fridge with stupid inside jokes. They weren't real anymore. Or maybe, they never were. I poured myself a glass of water, my throat dry, my mind spinning. Behind me, I could hear Madison shifting uncomfortably, still standing in the living room. She was debating whether to follow me. I could hear her breathing, heavy and uneven. Then, finally, she spoke. "Are you really going to act like this changes everything?" Her voice was softer now, but there was an edge to it. Like she was testing the waters. I took a slow sip, set the glass down carefully on the counter, and turned back to face her. "It does change everything." She let out a breath, crossing her arms. "Look, I know I messed up, okay? But we can move past this. We've been through worse." I laughed. But it wasn't the kind of laugh that came from something funny. It was hollow, sharp. The kind of laugh that made my own skin crawl. I tilted my head. "Tell me, Madison, when exactly have we been through worse than this?" She flinched, but she didn't back down. "I'm saying that we're bigger than this," she pushed. "One bad decision shouldn't erase years of marriage." That's what she was clinging to. Not love. Not regret. Not even guilt. Just time. As if longevity was the only thing that mattered. As if she deserved credit just for staying this long. I shook my head, pacing the length of the kitchen. My mind was racing, replaying the last few days, weeks, months. The signs had been there. I had just been too blind. Too trusting. Too stupid to see them for what they were. I turned to her again, really looking at her. Did I even know this woman? The Madison I had loved, the Madison I had built my life around, wasn't here. She had been replaced by someone else. Someone who could do what she did, and still come home and act like nothing happened. I inhaled sharply, forcing my hands to stop shaking. "Tell me the truth," I said finally. "The whole truth." She hesitated. "I already told you." "No," I cut her off, stepping forward. "The whole truth, Madison. No more excuses. No more downplaying. If there's even a single chance you want to fix this, you're going to tell me everything." Her throat bobbed as she swallowed. Her arms, once crossed so defensively, dropped to her sides. She looked down at the floor, and for a moment, I thought, maybe she was about to come clean. But then, she smiled. Not a big smile. Not a sarcastic smirk. Just a tiny, involuntary twitch of her lips. Like something about this moment, this fight, this mess, amused her. My stomach twisted. "Why are you smiling?" She blinked. The expression was gone in a flash, like she hadn't realized she had done it. I'm not," she said quickly, but she was. And in that second I knew. She wasn't sorry. She had been caught, yes. But sorry, no. If she had never been caught, she would have kept going. She would have walked through this door every night. Kissed me. Called me honey. Told me she loved me. All while sneaking around behind my back. This was a game to her. I took a slow step back, gripping the counter, trying to steady myself. "You were never going to tell me, were you?" She opened her mouth. But she had no answer. I nodded to myself. That's what I thought. The weight of it hit me all at once. My wife had been unfaithful. And worse than that, she didn't even regret it. I had spent years believing that Madison was my person, my partner, my best friend. I had loved her with everything I had. And yet here she was, standing in my kitchen, treating the destruction of our marriage like a minor inconvenience. Something inside me broke. Not in a way that made me want to yell. Not in a way that made me want to throw things or storm out. No. It was quieter than that. A slow, devastating realization that there was nothing left to fight for. Madison tilted her head slightly, her expression unreadable. So, what now? I met her gaze, feeling eerily calm. That's the question, isn't it? And for the first time since she walked through that door, I saw fear flash across her face. Because she realized something at the same time I did. This wasn't just my problem. She was about to lose everything too. I stood there, my breathing steady, my mind clearer than it had been in hours. Madison's face had changed. No longer defensive. No longer irritated. Now there was something else creeping in. Uncertainty. She had expected me to explode. She had expected screaming, accusations, maybe even a dramatic argument where I begged her for the truth. But I wasn't giving her that. Instead, I was just watching her. And that silence. It was worse than anything she had prepared for. I leaned against the counter, arms crossed. So tell me, I said, my voice level, almost casual. When did you decide this marriage didn't matter anymore? She flinched. Her fingers curled into fists at her sides. That's not fair, she muttered. I let out a short laugh, shaking my head. Fair, I repeated. You're talking about fair? Her lips pressed into a thin line. I told you, she said. This wasn't planned. It just happened. There it was again. That phrase. It just happened. Like she wasn't involved in making those choices. Like she had no control over anything. I studied her for a moment, really taking her in. This was the person I had trusted with everything. And yet, standing here now, she felt like a stranger. A long silence stretched between us before she finally spoke again. Alden, I never meant to hurt you. I exhaled slowly, rubbing my jaw. Then why did you? She had no answer. And that's when I knew. She wasn't sorry. She regretted getting caught. She regretted that she was standing here now, having to face the truth. But the choices she made. She didn't regret those. I turned toward the stairs, my body feeling heavy, my mind exhausted. Alden, she called after me, her voice thin, fragile. I paused, gripping the railing. You don't get to ask me for anything anymore. Her breath hitched. I turned my head slightly, just enough for her to hear the finality in my voice. We're done. And then, without another word, I climbed the stairs. I didn't look back. Because there was nothing left to see. I didn't sleep that night. Lying in bed, staring at the ceiling, I kept replaying everything in my head. The conversations. The excuses. The realization that the person I had trusted more than anyone had been hiding things from me for who knows how long. The house felt different now. Empty. Unfamiliar. I could hear Madison downstairs, pacing, restless. She was waiting for me to come down. Waiting for a conversation. Waiting for something that would make this feel like just another fight. But this wasn't just another fight. This wasn't something that could be patched up with apologies and empty reassurances. By the time the sun started rising, I already knew what I had to do. I got up, pulled on a sweatshirt, and grabbed my phone from the nightstand. My hands were steady as I scrolled through my contacts, searching for the name I never thought I'd need. My lawyer. I stared at the number for a moment. Just a moment. Then I pressed call. When I walked downstairs, Madison was still sitting on the couch, wrapped in a blanket, looking lost. The confident, carefree woman who had walked through the door yesterday was gone. Now she looked like someone who had just realized she had gambled everything, and lost. She sat up when she saw me, her voice hoarse. Alden, can we talk? I didn't sit. I didn't lean against the counter like I always did. I didn't give her the comfort of pretending things were okay. "There's nothing left to talk about," I said simply. Her face twisted. "We can fix this." I let out a short, humorless laugh. "Fix what, Madison?" I gestured around us. "Tell me, what exactly do you think we can salvage here?" She swallowed hard. I don't know, but we've been together for so long." I raised an eyebrow. "And that's supposed to mean what, exactly?" I asked. "That time somehow cancels out choices." She didn't answer. I sighed, reaching into my pocket and pulling out a single, folded document. I set it on the table. Her eyes darted to it, and she paled when she saw what it was. "You?" Her voice cracked. "I already called the lawyer," I said, my voice steady. "The divorce papers will be ready soon. This," I gestured to the paper, "this is just my request for you to start packing your things." Her breathing hitched. "Alden, wait." "No," my voice was firm. "Final." Her lips trembled. "You don't have to do this." I met her gaze. And for the first time, I saw her exactly as she was. Not the person I had once loved. Not my wife. Just the person who had made her choice. And now she had to live with it. I turned toward the front door, unlocking it, pulling it open wide. The cold morning air rushed in, filling the space between us. "You should go now," I said quietly. She hesitated. Her eyes searched mine for something. Anything that could save her. But she didn't find it. Because it wasn't there anymore. And as she finally walked toward the door with slow, uncertain steps, I felt something inside me loosen. Something that had been holding me down. Suffocating me. Keeping me chained to a past that no longer existed. And by the time she was gone, I could finally breathe again. The moment Madison stepped out that door, it felt like something heavy had been lifted off my chest. I didn't expect that. I thought I'd feel broken, angry, maybe even regretful. But instead, as the door clicked shut behind her, I felt something else entirely. Relief. I stood there for a long moment, just breathing. The air in the house felt different. Lighter. Quieter. Peaceful, in a way I hadn't noticed in years. Maybe I had been holding on to something that wasn't real for longer than I realized. I turned, looking around. This wasn't just a home we had built. It was my home now. And I wasn't going to let her choices define what came next. For the first time in a long time, I didn't feel trapped. The weeks that followed weren't easy. But they were mine. I focused on things I had neglected. Hobbies I had set aside. Friendships I had let fade. Even little things, like cooking for myself instead of ordering takeout. I reconnected with old friends. People who had been there before Madison. Before the chaos. Before I had lost sight of who I was. And the more time I spent away from the wreckage of my marriage, the more I realized just how much of myself I had given away to someone who never truly valued it. One afternoon, I found myself in a coffee shop, sipping something too strong, watching people pass by outside. That's when I heard a voice beside me. "Mind if I sit here?" I looked up. A woman stood there, holding a cup in one hand, gesturing to the empty seat across from me. She had a warm smile. The kind that didn't feel forced. I nodded. "Go ahead." She sat down, stirring her drink absent-mindedly. "You look like someone deep in thought." I chuckled. "Yeah, you could say that." She smiled again, tilting her head. "Well, if it helps, new beginnings usually start when you least expect them." I thought about that. New beginnings. Maybe she was right. Because for the first time in a long time, I wasn't looking back. Thank you for visited my YouTube channel. Your support, likes, and comments truly inspire me to create even more engaging content. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to subscribe and hit the notification bell so you never miss an update. You're a part of this amazing community, and I'm thrilled to share my stories with you. See you in the next video on YouTube.